And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Sipshan people. It was called the Ultimate in Planning and Imagination at its opening, and Mills Memorial Hospital has been expanded and renovated many times since 1961. A $1.2 million expansion in 1968 increased the number of beds to 87 and added an intensive care unit and a new laboratory and x-ray department. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives to bring you this story from 1992.
Dynamic healthcare individual, more money for
Victoria's announcement that it was holding Northwest Hospital funding to last year's levels set off a firestorm of protests throughout the region. Hospitals in Kitimat and Terrace soon announced bed closures and staff layoffs would be necessary to balance their budgets, and these measures were feared in Prince Rupert. In Terrace, a joint action committee was formed to organize the public backlash. They began with a main rally, which started in front of the hospital parking lot. People of all ages and political leanings showed up to voice their support for the hospital and their anger for Health Minister Elizabeth Cull. Then they marched through the heart of the city, finally ending up at the farmers' market lot, where speaker after speaker called upon Victoria to change its mind.
Well, I think the crowd that showed up tonight will send a clear message to Victoria that Terrace doesn't take kindly to a lack of funding.
The report of the Royal Commission on Healthcare did emphasize that we need to bring the care closer to home. Now, it's very difficult for me to understand how you do that, but by closing, in effect, a very efficiently run hospital, which has been shown to be providing a good service for a certain part of the province.
It's time the government recognizes the Pacific Northwest as a growing, vital, and integral part of this province. Mr. Giesbrecht and the NDP government are planning the destruction of health care available to you. If you find this as unacceptable as I do, then speak up. Let the MLA you elected know how you feel. We elected him. He's responsible to us, not the NDP party. Swamp him, the Premier, and the Minister of Health with complaints. It's the only thing that they're going to listen to.
Hospital Administrator Michael Leisinger expressed the frustration of many in the crowd when he recalled 1991's budget crisis.
Last summer, about 9 months ago, we were in this exact same situation. We were faced with the loss of 20 beds, $250,000 deficit, and we started a funding appeal. And I've still got a souvenir from that funding appeal. It's got this hokey little teddy bear on the pocket here, and it says, Howie the Healthcare Bear, in touch with the heartbeat of Terrace. And this is really, it's frustrating that I had to haul this out again this year. That we had an agreement with the Ministry of Health that we were being funded at an adequate level after the Malcolm Walker review. We thought we had our baseline finally once and for all established, and that the ministry recognized how much it takes to run our hospital. And now on April, I think the 8th it was, we got our funding letter, and it was worse than our worst fear. There was no new money there, and worse than that, we had to cover all costs of inflation, and as well the wage settlements that the BCNU have recently negotiated, and the ones that the other unions are now trying to get, and that left us almost $700,000 short. Now, fortunately, they did reinstate the Malcolm Walker money, and we're now only looking at $525,000. It's almost strange to say only 525. It's a number that we can barely comprehend. It's incomprehensible. I mean, we took at least 2 weeks to get our minds around how you can even possibly find that kind of money out of an operation that the ministry itself only 2 weeks ago said was very efficiently run. We've had to make some really tough decisions because the board is mandated to present a balanced budget by next Friday. And unfortunately, the cuts have been planned, they've been announced, and unless we get some funding,
In the crowd was New Democratic MLA Helmut Giesbrecht. During last year's budget crisis, when the Socreds were in power, he was a strong supporter of Mills Memorial. Now, as a government backbencher, he assured those gathered for the rally that his commitment hadn't wavered and that he intended to press his case to his colleagues in Victoria.
I have said to people there that we take our health care seriously and that we went through this exercise once last year. Although I think there's some understanding of that, maybe we have to press the point home a little bit more. I think one of the reasons that it's important is because over the years, and I've been here since 1967, that hospital care in Terrace is something that's really grown. It's grown because there were an awful lot of people that worked really hard to get it there. And that's what makes it so difficult for me as a backbench member of the government to kind of watch while something is happening that looks like it's threatening it.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. The first documented petitions were made by slaves building the pyramids who petitioned for better working conditions. A petition is a request to do something, most commonly addressed to a government official or public entity. In a colloquial sense, a petition is a document addressed to some official signed by numerous individuals. Let us return to the archives with Prince Rupert Hospital Board Chair Ian Cornish.
On behalf of the board of the Prince Rupert Regional Hospital, I'd like to thank the organisers of this rally here this evening. They've done a lot of hard work in going out in the community and getting the good long petition signed from all the residents showing how important this regional hospital is to the residents of Prince Rupert. It's great to see a good turnout here this evening. The board has been trying extremely hard in negotiations with the Ministry of Health to do whatever we can to get additional funding for the hospital. And it's clear that public support like we're getting here this evening is really very important. In fact, I could say it is absolutely crucial to the success that we have in achieving additional funding for our hospital.
Rally organizers presented the Forest Minister with a petition bearing over 7,000 names. Miller assured the crowd that the NDP was committed to maintaining quality health care in BC, and he believes he got his message across.
I certainly can appreciate the sentiment of people in Prince Rupert about the issues of health care and the fact that this community has worked extremely hard to attract medical specialists. There's been a chronic shortage in the past. And it's a difficult issue we're trying to work through with the hospital in terms of their budget. Why have they accumulated this deficit? And I think logically that's the correct thing to do. Try to identify why the deficit has been accumulating, first of all, before you agree to simply write it off.
The Prince Rupert Hospital faces a deficit of nearly $1 million. Board Chairman Cornish says many departments will be affected by whatever budget-cutting measures trustees have to take.
This year, one of the things we're going to do is cap our pharmacy costs, our drug costs at the 1991 levels. There's going to be an increase in our cafeteria prices to reflect the increase in the general charges that haven't happened over the last few years. And there's also going to be increases on some of the outpatient services we provide, such as splints and casts and so on.
In Terrace, a $500,000 deficit means the closing of 22 beds and the elimination of 10.5 full-time positions. Administrator Michael Leisinger.
Certainly, it'll be a much tighter operation. The residents may find that waiting lists are a little bit longer, that maybe the staff is required to enforce policy a little bit more strictly on discharge times and that sort of thing. People may not be able to get some of the outpatient rehab services from our physiotherapy department. They may be referred downtown instead. So I guess we're taking one step closer to being more of a big city hospital rather than a sort of a small town hospital.
But you'll still be able to offer services to the region and be a regional referral center.
That's right. The success of Mills Memorial Hospital is really hinges on our ability to service the outlying regions. 40% of our business comes from outside the Terrace Thornhill area, and we need that kind of workload to sustain and maintain the specialty services that we have here.
Kitimat General Hospital's deficit was also in the $500,000 range, and bed closures and layoffs were announced there as well.
Beds are being closed at the Kitimat Hospital and services are being reduced, but there's no alternate community support available for people. So of course our concern is that people who require medical attention in Kitimat won't be able to get it at the hospital, and there's no support to get it elsewhere.
Why is the government doing this? Surely bed closures and service reductions don't jive with the new Democratic philosophy of health care for all. Health Minister Elizabeth Cull paid a visit to the Northwest last month because of the public outcry, and she explained to reporter Kathy Brooks the reasoning behind her decisions.
So we said, let's look at a rule of thumb of 3 beds per 1,000, which is about what the Royal Commission recommended. They actually recommended a little less, and it's pretty close to what the average is in BC right now. But we also recognize that communities in the north and in some parts of the interior have other circumstances which have to be taken into consideration. You know, a lower level of community services to begin with, greater distances for patients to travel, impossible weather and geography for much of the year, and so we added an additional 50% onto that 3-bed rule of thumb and said, you know, beyond that extra 50%, we think hospitals probably have some efficiencies that they could look to provide the same quality of service but for fewer dollars. Now, maybe the 50% wasn't enough. Maybe it should have been 60 or 70%. But there are hospitals in this region that are 100% and over that standard. And I really do have to ask, if a hospital is operating at twice the number of beds per 1,000 population that is on average in the province, and add to that that they have, you know, less than a 60% occupancy rate, meaning that, you know, some of those beds are not used a lot of the time, surely there's got to be some cost savings that we could look to improve services in these regions.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. The 1991 BC Seton Royal Commission on Healthcare, which among other things recommended less reliance on hospitals and healthcare institutions and more on home-based support systems. Let us return to the archives with Chair of the Terrace Joint Action Committee on Health, Elaine Pictou.
Well, that's a great approach. I mean, I believe in preventative care, and I believe that if someone can be nursed closer to home, as the Seton report says, that yes, those persons should be nursed in their home or in their village or whatever that means. But we don't have those kind of services set up yet in this community.
One man who can see both sides of the argument is Dr. David Bowering, Chief Medical Health Officer for the Skeena Union Board of Health. He says there's a lot of good in what the government is doing, but he understands the misgivings of hospital workers.
There may be some validity to it. I think it's more a case of the coordination and the linkages haven't been recognized, and we haven't been worked on as much as they need to be. There are good projects and good things that are happening in terms of linking community and hospitals that I think have real potential to assist our hospitals in this region with this process. One example would be in Prince Rupert. The mental health people there are working to develop a crisis intervention team that I believe will function very specifically in the hospital when people come in crisis, to see if there are alternatives to hospital placement for some of those people.
This month, Mills Memorial Hospital has made a number of moves in order to balance its budget. Administrator Michael Leisinger showed us some of the changes planned and a few of the positive developments at the hospital as well.
This is the medical surgical ward, 30 beds, and these were some of the beds that we were going to close last year during the funding crisis that Malcolm Walker helped start out, but this year we're not looking at them at all. We're trying to protect the core of the hospital, and it's pediatrics and psychiatry that we're looking at. Here's maybe a positive note. This is the day room for Med-Surg. The Connects Club donated $14,000 to renovate the day room here on Med-Surg, and previously it was the old terrazzo floor and the ceiling tiles that were yellowed from the cigarette smoke and whatnot. But now it's all new furniture, it's been painted, There's a nice carpet in now, and it makes for a much nicer environment for those patients that are able to use the day lounge. And we've also made it non-smoking to protect the furniture, the carpet, and the ceiling tiles. The other positive development at the hospital, while we're looking for positives, is the palliative care room that we're developing. And it's been completely paid for with volunteer money, donations from the community as well. And the purpose of it is to provide a room that's providing a more homey atmosphere for those patients admitted to hospital who are in a terminal condition. The hospital enjoys tremendous support from the community, and without them, we wouldn't be able to afford many of the little extras, such as palliative care, such as a nicely appointed day room, and not to mention the thousands of dollars that pour in annually to the hospital for equipment purchase. And then, of course, the Remley Foundation has benefited tremendously from the community's support. This then is the pediatrics ward. And here we're going down from a rating of 22 beds down to 6. And what we'll be doing is we'll be retaining these 3 rooms here. Now there's more than 6 beds distributed between the 3 rooms, but what the nursing staff and the physicians will then do is ensure that no more than 6 patients are admitted to the 3 rooms. And it's just that there's different types of care delivered to each room. These are single rooms, that's a large room with cribs in it. So just depending on the patient mix, they'll then decide who goes into what room, but try to keep it to the 6 or fewer.
That doesn't put you in a precarious position, does it?
No, our average pediatric count is below that. So other than that one time of the year, typically March, April, where we might get into croup season, and that's when our pediatric count has a potential of going higher than that. Other than that, we should be quite fine. And then the staff will just deal with a particular problem like that when it arises. So we'll just have those 3 rooms, and then we're also going to maintain 2 other rooms, which will be for day surgery, and that's this room right here. And and there's a mirror image of this on the other side of the corridor. This 4-bed room will then be used for day surgery, and won't be counted as part of our official operating statistics as inpatient beds.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
In 1967, Canadians welcomed the first McDonald's restaurant to Richmond, British Columbia. First celebrated in 1977, McHappy Day event has contributed nearly $66 million to Ronald McDonald Houses and local Canadian children's charities. In this final segment of Open Connection, we return to the archives to see how this organization has helped Mills Memorial Hospital.
The Ronald McDonald's Children's Charities donated just under $5,000 to the hospital to completely renovate this pediatric playroom. Before this, it was what we saw in the day room, terrazzo floor and rather banged up sort of 60s furniture and that sort of thing. And Ronald McDonald Children's Charities, through Malcolm Hillcove, the local McDonald's owner, saw fit to sponsor this project. And then Heather Guernsey, the head nurse, and her staff picked out the colors and the furniture, and I think did a very good job in turning what was quite an unpleasant room to be into a very nice one.
I can think of at least 3 kids who would have a terrific time in this room.
Mine would be one of them. Lots of nice toys. And down here we are going to the psychiatric unit. Of the 22 beds that we're closing in the hospital, 6 of them are down here on the psych unit. And now the 6 beds that we're closing, though, are 6 beds that don't normally get used. The psych unit typically runs at only 60% occupancy. So by closing 6 beds, what we're really doing is consolidating the unit, and that's fewer rooms that have to be, fewer lights on, those don't have to be kept up by housekeeping and that sort of thing. And these would tentatively are the rooms that would be shut down the furthest away from the nursing station. But we're still working with the psychiatric committee and the staff down here to determine exactly which 6 beds would get closed.
Meanwhile, the community drive to see that these closures aren't permanent pushes on. Terrace's Joint Action Committee took to the shopping malls, asking people to sign petition cards demanding that more money be made available. Kitimat's Health Action Committee also circulated a petition. Cull responded by setting up a review committee to look at the hospitals in Terrace, Kitimat, and Prince Rupert.
If we discover we've made a mistake in the funding allocation, if it has not been fair, it may not be enough, but everyone is experiencing that. But if there has been a real error in how it's been decided, then we'll look at it again. I'm certainly not going to be rigid that once the decision's made, you can't take another look at it. And I guess that's what this trip's all about.
Well, as someone told me today, she didn't say no, so obviously she's willing to listen. She's willing to take a look at the situation again. Perhaps the statements and the comments and the concerns that have been voiced by the three communities have now been heard by the ministry, and that they're willing to reassess the position and the stance that they've taken. And so, yes, I'm encouraged, and I hope that the review again comes to the same conclusion as the 2 or 3 previous reviews did, which is that Mills Memorial is a very efficient operation and that it has been underfunded in the past.
Cull also said she's a bit concerned about the budget balancing measures taking place.
Kitimat and Terrace's case, they told me this morning that their budget shortfall is about 5%. But that 5% budget shortfall is causing them to close 25% of their beds. And I don't understand why that should be. I mean, if your budget is short 5%, why is the impact on the hospital more than 5%? And certainly the gap between the 5 and the 25% really concerns me. I want to find out why that is happening.
Well, it's a very good question, because on the surface it does seem to not make sense. But really the beds that we're closing are the ones that aren't being occupied at the present time. I mean, our hospital overall is only running at 65–70% occupancy. So for example, on the psychiatric unit, where we're at 60% occupancy, we're closing down those 6 beds that don't get used. On pediatrics, we're rated at 22. But we typically don't use more than 6 at a time. So what we're doing is we're consolidating the units, taking away the option to overflow into those extra beds, trying to force the utilization issue, and keep the costs down. Now, where the cost savings are coming, of course, are in the staff reductions that go hand in hand with trying to find $525,000. But the cost savings aren't 100% correlated with the bed closures. For example, we're losing 6 beds on psychiatry, but none of the nursing staff are being cut on psych, the activity worker, none of that is being affected. I mean, the hospital is losing the full-time social worker, a portion of whose time is spent in psychiatry, but certainly overall, the jobs that are being cut aren't correlated to the beds, one-to-one sort of thing. So the minister was right in asking her question. But I think that once her ministry and once that review team take a look at where the cuts were made and why the beds are being closed, that they'll find that it does make sense.
Welcome back to Open. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.